Hey team, today we're going to talk about GitHub Actions. We're going to go over what they are and how you can use them with your project. I'm Colby Fayok, and if this is your first time here, make sure you hit subscribe for future updates. GitHub Actions are a relatively new feature for GitHub. They provide an easy way to add CI/CD workflows to your project. If you're not familiar with CI/CD, it stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment. For this walkthrough, we're going to go through two parts. The first, we're going to go through some simple tests with a function, and the second part, we're going to go through actually building out a workflow that's going to send a message to Slack anytime a pull request is opened. So to get started, I have this function called mooncake says. I have a test that runs 2 instances just to make sure that it's outputting the right stuff. And if we run the tests, we can see them both pass. So I'm starting with this demo repo in GitHub. The first thing we want to do is navigate to the Actions tab. GitHub provides a lot of options by default in their marketplace. Here we're going to actually use the Node.js one and set up this workflow. Once it loads, we have a few things in mind. First, we want to rename it to test, just so we have an idea of what it's actually doing. But as we go through the file, first we have the name, and that can be really whatever you want. Again, I'm going to name it test. Next, we have the on key. This is going to tell the GitHub action when we want it to actually trigger. So here we're saying both when it gets pushed to the master branch and when a pull request is created on the master branch, we want this to trigger. Next are your jobs. That's going to be what's actually going to run. So in this instance, we have one called build, which again can be anything, whether you want to call it test or whatever. It's going to run on the latest instance of Ubuntu, which is a pretty common server to run on. We have a strategy, which is basically a way of saying that we have a couple different node versions we want to run it on. So we're going to run it on 10, 12, and 14. And then finally we have steps, which is what's actually going to happen with our workflow. So here we're going to use the actions checkout, which is going to basically just check out our code. Then we're going to use Node.js, we're going to use the different versions from the matrix, and then the action setup node, which is going to go ahead and set up node for us to use. It's going to use each of those different versions when it loops through the different processes for us. Then we're going to install our dependencies with npm CI, which does the same thing as npm install, but it doesn't upgrade the packages at all. Then npm run build if it's present. We don't have npm run build since we're not building anything here, so we can probably just remove that. But then finally, we're going to run npm test, which is really what we're looking for here. And really, those are the only changes we need to make at this point, if any changes really. And then we can go ahead and commit this to master. So once that page loads, we're going to see that GitHub automatically created a new file for us called test.yaml. If we go into that file, we can see the exact same thing that we saw in the configuration. Now, if we want to see this actually work, we need to modify some code. So let's go over to the code. And for this, we're going to actually break some code intentionally. So let's go into our index file. We're going to edit it. And let's give mooncake a different face. Let's put his eye up. And then just say it should be with an exclamation point. Then we're going to commit it, and we're going to commit it to a new branch. That way we're not actually committing it to master. With that new branch, we're going to create a pull request. And as you'll notice right away, this is going to start running some checks. We can see that it's already running our test on each of those different versions of Node. And as they start to finish, you can see that they're failing, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. So let's go see the logs for that. So the first thing we want to do is go to Actions, then we want to select our commit, and here we can select which process we want to check, which let's just look at 10x, and we can see immediately that our run npm test failed. If we go into it, you can see it failed, and it'll even tell us why, just like it would on our command line. So at this point, we have our pull request saying that it didn't pass, but we can still see that it has no conflicts, so they're telling us that it's green to merge, but we don't want that. So how can we prevent it? The first thing we want to do is go over to settings. Here we can go over to the branches tab, and here we're going to see a section called branch protection rules, and we're going to want to add a rule. Here for the branch name pattern, let's just say all branches. And then if we scroll down a little bit, we want to see that require status checks to pass before merging is checked. And for this, we can choose every single one of them as we want to make sure all of those tests pass. And then we can hit create. And once that's done, we can go back to our pull request and we can see that required statuses must pass before merging, and it's now yellow. Now, because I'm the administrator of this repository, it's saying that I can still merge if I want to, but anybody who's not an admin won't be able to merge until those status checks pass. So now that we have our workflow properly testing our code, how can we actually ping Slack anytime a new pull request is opened? So for this, we're going to use this GitHub action called post Slack messages. Using a Slack bot token by creating an app and our channel ID, we can basically post whatever message we want to any channel we want. That means to get started, you're going to need a Slack app. Now, I'm not going to walk you through that part, but if you want to check out how, you can see my actual blog tutorial to get started with that. Once you have that bot created, we're going to actually need a token so that we can actually post those messages to Slack. So once you have your app, you want to go over to the OAuth and permissions and actually copy that token, which we're going to put into GitHub. To get started with our new workflow, we're going to go over to the Actions tab and we're going to select New Workflow. Instead of using the Node.js one, we're going to actually set one up ourselves. So click that link. And here you can see that it actually gives you a lot of the same things, but we can clear a lot of this out since we're not going to use it. So let's go ahead and clear everything except for the first line of the steps. And for this, we only want to have it run on pull request. Let's change the name of the file to Slack. We can change the name to Slack. And instead of build, we'll call it Slack. Now for using this, we want to copy and paste the usage, go back over to our file, and under steps, we can paste that in and make sure we format that. So now that we have that formatted, let's actually get it committed. Let's commit it to master. So if you notice, we have this Slack bot token and it's coming from secrets. That's the same OAuth token that we were talking about from Slack. So let's go set that in the secrets in settings. Once we're on the secrets tab, we can go to new secret and we want to call it Slack bot token and we want to paste in our key. Finally, if you go back to our file, you can see that it also sets a channel ID and that's where it's going to send the message. So we want to make sure that we update that as well. To find the actual channel ID, we need to go to our Slack web app. So if you look at the URL on the channel that you want to be in, you can see that it says client and then it's going to be your workspace ID, but at the end there, it's going to be our channel ID. So we want to copy that value. And then we can edit that workflow file, update our ID, and commit that back to master. So before we actually set up that pull request, we need to have our bot user inside of our Slack channel. So we're going to invite our user, and mine's called getBot. And finally, to test this, I'm going to do a really simple example. So I'm going to simply edit the README and just say testing. And then I'm going to commit that to a new branch and create a pull request with that. And if you want to follow along, you can look in the logs just like we did with our test. And after it's done, we can see that it succeeded and open up our Slack app and see our hello world. Now, hello world doesn't give us a ton of information, right? So what can we do to customize that? Well, first you can use Slack's block hit builder in order to customize what your messaging looks like. It's just an easy way to kind of format your message. Additionally, GitHub provides context in its actions, so that's basically variables that we can use. Particularly, the GitHub context gives us a lot of information, like links to our pull request. Now, I'm not going to actually walk through creating that, but I already have one pre-formatted that we can take a look at. So as you can see, we're using the pull request URL in here with a link to view the pull request. We're using that same blocks key that you would have seen in that. The only thing to note is that we're using a JSON object that we're sending as an argument to that Slack action, and we're setting our channel ID and the blocks format with escaped quotes. So after committing that, I'm going to do the exact same thing and edit a file and just simply add another string. And similarly, I'm going to create a new branch and a new pull request. And once we see that that Slack notification passed and is done, we can look back on our Slack channel and see the pull request messaging with a link to our pull request. So if you follow along with me, you should have both an action that's going to run your test, prevent from merging if it fails, as well as a Slack notification whenever pull request is made. The cool thing about GitHub Actions is there's a ton of them available right now for free. And if there are none that fit your need, you can even write one yourself. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future updates. Thanks for watching.